thank you very much, Yanni. It's a real pleasure to be part of this symposium. We've got three 20-minute sessions in this last session of the symposium. Really, we're going from an overview of University of Sydney work through to a real focus on energy and the opportunities around innovation that are both there on farm. So, and we've also got 25 minutes of discussion on topics at the end of this session. So please use the Q&A piece there to make my life a hell of a lot easier in that 25 minutes. Please use that Q&A for any questions that you have through this session. And also, if you do have any technical problems, also that chat function as well. And please feel free to send the link of this symposium to your networks. It's still not too late to get other people involved in this, because I promise you this is going to be a fantastic session. So yeah, it's still not too late, send it on. And just talking to Yanni just briefly before this session, all this session and obviously the previous sessions are obviously being recorded, and they'll be available on the Dairy Research Foundation website, I believe, next week. So please feel free to forward that on as well. So this is the last session, as Nico was indicating, and we're really taking you on a journey through from business to society risks. Rupert this morning has talked to you about a few opportunities there that are also there. And you've also heard from some fantastic young scientists in our emerging scientist session, which is always popular. And now here we are at innovation, which is really a theme which is very, very close to my heart. As I said before, we have three 20-minute presentations followed by 25 minutes of discussion on this whole topic. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our first speaker for the session, who is Dr. Sabrina Lomax. Sabrina actually chaired earlier session this morning, and Yanni has actually introduced Sabrina also, but Sabrina's research is focused on promoting best practice livestock production through the integration of technology and animal behaviour and welfare science. Sabrina's family background led her to this interest, and she completed her PhD in 2011, really focused on painful livestock husbandry procedures. Her postdoctoral research examined novel methods of pain assessment and alleviation, and now is a key member of both the Dairy Science and Livestock Production and Welfare Group here at Sydney. So without further ado, Sabrina.
Thank you, Cameron. I'm hearing Cameron through the wall as well as through the speaker here. Thanks everyone for joining us for this year's online symposium. It's been running really well, and it's really exciting to be a part of it and to represent our groups in the symposium today. I'm going to talk a little bit about technology from the perspective of, yes, you've probably heard a lot about technology over the past few years. I know I've seen a lot of presentations. I wanted to share a bit about what we do with technology here in the group, what the potential applications are for industry, and where I see this movement sort of going in terms of future applications. Revolution or evolution? Personally, my opinion is it's evolution. I know that there's an overwhelming amount of technology available, and I think it's really important for us to focus in on what we're asking of it to do. A little bit about me. My family background is actually in the beef type of cow. My parents have a beef property up near Tamworth in northwest New South Wales. So this is a photo of me and my family and my partner. So this is where I really got my interest in the animal sciences. I really had a lot of passion for working with cattle on the farm and went in to study animal science at university, and then went on to do a PhD in animal production and welfare. I worked in pain mitigation for livestock for probably the first half of my career. And then I moved into more into the production and systems approach, where I started to use technology in my research. And that's where my interest around how we can use technology in both research and on farm came about. So for our international guests, as well as some of you who may not know where we are here at the University of Sydney, we're located at the Camden campus, about 70 kilometres southwest of Sydney. My family farm is around about up here somewhere in northwest New South Wales. So we're local to the New South Wales area. I am a member of the University of Sydney's Dairy Science Group. This is a picture of our group at one of our very many multicultural lunches that we have regularly here at the group pre-COVID. Obviously, we're standing a little close. We have members of our group from all over the world, which makes us such a unique and diverse team. We've got a student, Mastitis, here from Malaysia. We've got Argentinians representing the Latin Americas. We've got a few of our team are from Bangladesh. We have Mona here, who I'll share some of her research. She's recently completed her PhD and has gone back. Dominique is our other welfare scientist in our group. I think you might recognize this guy over here in the shorts. You've seen some presentations from Patricia and Sarah. And we also had a visitor last year from Dan Weary's group at the University of British Columbia. This is Lara here. And you know Lynn. So really nice diverse group, which makes working here very, very enjoyable. I'm also wear the hat of a member of the livestock production and welfare group. This is really where my research stems to. I'm a welfare and behavior scientist, and predominantly most of our research at the moment is funded by the red meat industry, so I thought I'd give it a plug. There's a lot of synergies between what we do in the red meat industry and what we can do with in the dairy industry, and there's been learnings transferred between both industries. We're really focused on partnering with industry to generate our research questions and to find solutions. We partner with commercial companies, for example, Allflex, and their animal monitoring technologies to help answer some of these questions for industry. So how did I get an interest in technology? I guess this sort of used to be my life as a scientist. Luckily, I now get to hand that baton over to our PhD students and our honours students. What you see here is a couple of our students sitting on the back of a ute at a feedlot watching animals, because this used to be the way that we would observe animal behaviour and monitor animal behaviour. I'm imagining you can see some of the limitations here. One being, yes, it's extremely time consuming. We also are limited in our ability to continuously monitor individual behavior through time. You know, as the size of the number of animals increases, it becomes difficult to follow one animal continuously, as well as it's pretty impossible for a human to do that without a very, very large team. So we now have access to technologies which give us the opportunity to do this in real time, continuously, and at the individual level. So as a researcher, it's really changed my life. And I'm sure some of my PhD students are really happy about the fact that they don't have to spend too much time watching animals in the field, although I know that we all love watching animal behavior, and it is very interesting. But in terms of gathering data, this has really changed the way that we conduct animal behavior science, and even measuring physiology and animal health through time. And this is the same thing for farmers. We see farmers increasingly adopting technology to allow them and enable them to make decisions on the individual level, and shift the way that time is spent within their day away from the more time-consuming activities into more of those, innovative ways of spending their time. So this here is an example of some of the technology we use a lot within our group. So partnering with Allflex, a lot of you have seen these rumination collars that our dairy cows wear, that are basically accelerometers that record animal behavior profiles continuously through time. In the beef industry, we're using an ear tag, which is exactly the same type of technology, but shrunk down into something much smaller that, I've got one here, that, you know, beef cattle can wear across their lifetime. The way we're using this technology is to measure lifetime, objectively measure lifetime welfare for a beef animal through time. You can see the kind of data that we get from these is really detailed behavior profiles. We're getting a behavior for every minute of the day. So this is the day in the life of a dairy cow. You may have seen this before in other presentations. You know, we've got purple rumination here. The dairy cows are going out to pasture after milking, so they're eating in the green here, and then they spend much of the middle of the day ruminating and digesting that feed, and then back out after milking to have another allocation of fresh pasture. By understanding these behaviors and the structure of this behavior, we can actually start to develop key performance indicators of things like reduced health and welfare. And not only does that help us to benchmark our activities from an animal welfare perspective, so relating to some of the talks that we heard yesterday around society and the social impacts of what we do on farms, but it also allows us to build in alert systems for farmers for early intervention that also helps improve not only welfare, but their production outputs on farm. So, you know, this is one example of a type of technology that can be broadly applied across production and welfare. You've just seen a talk by Juan Ignacio. This is a paper that came out a couple of years ago looking at how farmers and service providers perceive adoption of precision dairy technologies. I won't go into too much detail on this graph, but what you're seeing is the different types of technology that are currently used on farm according to herd sizes. So from the smaller herd sizes through to the larger herd sizes. Why I like this graph is that I think it really represents the evolution of the dairy industry, and it reflects the trends in adoption into the future. As herd sizes increase, the use of technology will need to increase to enable that individualized monitoring and to allow us to even work towards technologies that help us control animal behavior, which I will present on as well. So technology is kind of inevitable as we shift into the future of what dairy farming is. I wanted to highlight that estrus detection systems, when this paper came out, were used around 10% of farms, but looking into the future, that number is greatly going to increase. And I'm going to run you through a few case studies of some of the work we've done here in the group around the use of these technologies. The first being estrus detection systems. Obviously, estrus detection is very important in the dairy industry to optimize the timing of AI and pregnancy and to reduce the labor and the cost associated with that. And then we've got diseases like mastitis and lameness, which represent some of the greatest health issues for the industry. And having sensors that allow us to early identify these issues early and intervene will also improve the production and welfare outputs on farm. Not only that, but allow for us to select more resilient livestock, more tolerant livestock into the future. And finally, I'll present some work that we've done looking at heat stress detection in beef cattle that has a lot of relevance for the dairy industry, in particular as we move into a changing climate, which is also inevitable. With a warming climate, the impact of heat is only going to get worse. And so we're going to need ways to not only select more tolerant individuals, but to allow for intervention at the individual level. So I'll share some of the data from that as well. So a bit of work, there's been a lot of work looking at different automated estrus detection systems. We've obviously used the Allflex collars in our herd at Corstorphine here at the University of Sydney. This study really looked at comparing these automated detection systems against the traditional methods of visual detection of estrus behavior, so cows mounting behavior in the herd. And in a research setting, what we found is that these systems work just as well, if not better, than a lot of the visual observations and the time-consuming impact of that. It also allows us to collect data, feed that into our herd management software, and optimize the process going forward. The other thing I really like about these technologies is that they're done on the individual level, which allows us to account for that individual variation and make targeted decisions on the individual level. So great, Rupert's actually introduced you to some of the work, the shared work between his group and ours with PhD student Lameness. So you may have seen her present on this mastitis detection model previously. What this work has found essentially is that using inline milk meters, we can actually detect mastitis inline using automated milking systems. And this model of detection is almost perfect. So that's really exciting for what we can do with these inline milk meters going forward. And as Rupert presented, so I don't really need to go into too much detail, we can actually differentiate between types of pathogens by combining different measures, as well as combining this with the activity sensors that I've just talked about. We can improve the prediction of the onset of disease, which has really huge implications for managing welfare on farm. Another really key health issue is lameness. As you well know, it's very difficult and time consuming to detect, to measure, and to quantify. There's a lot of subjectivity in our visual observation of lameness, as well as needing to individually observe every animal. So on the herd level, a lot of animals are missed, which presents both production and welfare issues going forward. So you've probably seen John Gardinier. He's just finished his PhD on advanced perception and precision livestock robotics, evaluating lameness. He's used object detection using very simple camera systems to actually detect each hoof and its placement and path through time, which allows a continuous evaluation of abnormalities in gait rather than trying to sort of lump animals into different scores, because as we well know, health and pain happens on a continuous scale rather than these ordinal scales of time. And heat stress is going to be increasingly an issue for all cattle production systems and all animal production systems as we move into a changing climate, a warming climate. Our PhD student Ashraful has done some really exciting work looking at feedlot cattle, using these ear tag sensors to accurately detect heavy breathing or panting in feedlot. So this graph here is just showing that when we observe panting, it aligns really well with the predicted panting from the sensor. And even more importantly, we're able to identify that within breeds, so these are Bos Taurus animals, within breeds, we can see variability between individuals. So this is one group of animals, all Bos Taurus, and we selected on a really hot day the animals that were panting most of the time and the animals that were panting the least of the time, so the top 10 and bottom 10%. And then we measured with the ear tag sensors across the entire feed period of 60 days, the amount of time they spend panting within an hour. So you can see that even in the early morning, around 7 o'clock in the morning, those animals that are very tolerant, that are not very tolerant, are panting up to 15 or 20 minutes within that hour very early. So we can start to see how this individual detection can allow us to select animals that are more tolerant going forward, or even select animals that may not be well adapted to those kind of environments. And we see the same applications coming forward in publications for the dairy industry. So selecting heat tolerant individuals is a big one, as well as mitigating heat on the individual level. So individual variability is kind of going to be my segue here to my next slide, because what I've just talked about are all these monitoring technologies on the individual level, and that variability is something we can accommodate really well with these animal monitoring technologies. However, when we start to think about technologies that we want to use to control animal behavior or manipulate animal behavior, that individual variation is something we need to understand more into the future to make technologies work for us on a herd basis. So that's my segue into virtual fencing technology, and Patricia's done a great job of introducing the technology for me. What we know about this technology, yes, we have individual animals wearing collars, but we're controlling, so far what we've done is we've controlled animal movement on a herd basis. So we know that the technology works really well to contain grazing dairy cattle. They learn very quickly and they remain within the inclusion zone quite well. So, however, there is a lot of individual variation in the number and type of stimuli that they receive and how they use a space within that grazing allocation. Where we might face challenges into the future is using these systems to do a little bit more than just, say, strip grazing your herd. So we did a study looking at separating grazing dairy cows on the same paddock. So you can see two groups on pasture, and it worked quite well. We could keep them about 90 meters apart, but this is where, just like you and I'm very gregarious. Social interactions really motivate me. We found the same thing with our cows. They were socially motivated to cross the pasture and meet their mates on the other side of the paddock, which meant that they got a lot of stimuli and broke down through the system. So what this means is that some animals may be more motivated by social aspects than feed, which is something we need to understand a little bit more, these individuality traits, if we're going to see how we can use this technology in new ways going into the future. So to summarize, individuality, just like everyone on this webinar today, these are really important aspects of animal behavior that we need to understand. Technology is enabling us to understand what it is that motivates animals, what they want, and therefore to help us control or manipulate their behavior. But technology presents these great opportunities to play to the individual and to manage the individual within the herd that will help improve welfare and productivity into the future. Thank you all for your time. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, and I've popped up our websites here so you can see a bit more about what work we are doing here in the group.
Sabrina, thank you so much for your presentation. And